Hello, friends and listeners of the Pioneer Podcast. This is your co-host, Justin Martell, and today we have a very special, free, premium episode of the Pioneer Podcast for you. This is the interview Gareth Johnson and I conducted with former Congressman, two-time presidential candidate, and former mayor of Cleveland, Dennis Kucinich, discussing his new book, The Division of Light and Power, which is out now. Let us not waste any time, and let's get right into the Pioneer Podcast interview with Dennis Kucinich. Hello and welcome to the Pioneer Podcast. Today we are speaking with Dennis J. Kucinich. Mr. Kucinich has a long history of public service, starting as Cleveland City Council member and then mayor of Cleveland, Ohio from 1977 to 1979. And from 1995 to 1997, he represented Ohio's 23rd District in the Ohio State Senate and spent 16 years in the U.S. House of Representatives from 1997 to 2013. He ran twice for the Democratic nomination for U.S. President, which is where our paths crossed, as I volunteered for his 2008 Democratic primary campaign in New Hampshire. And I remember the uphill battle at the time against the mainstream Democratic Party, who thought that Mr. Kucinich was in some way radical for advocating getting the U.S. out of the quagmire in the Middle East, a universal single-payer healthcare system, and free college tuition. It appears, though, that he was ahead of his time, as these policy ideas have now become mainstream among left thinkers in America. His latest book is The Division of Light and Power, out now from Finney Avenue Books. It is the story of Mr. Kucinich's battle against a plot to sabotage Cleveland's municipal electric facility, Municipal, by the city's banks and sell it to its privately owned competitor, Cleveland Electrical Illuminating Company. Kucinich is standing up to the banks and corporate interests brought with it personal attacks, an assassination attempt, but he did not fold and was later vindicated as this move saved the city of Cleveland an estimated $195 million between 1985 and 1995. Mr. Kucinich, thank you for joining us today.
I really appreciate the chance to be on the Pioneer Podcast, and I look forward to our discussion.
So I guess, with America's and the American public's faith in the government and its public servants, mainly maybe at a all-time low, it seems like a very advantageous time for a book like The Division of Light and Power. Is that what played into your decision to tell this story right now?
Well, in a way, telling the story now is happenstance because I started the book in November of 1979. And
wow,
I was so close to the events at the time that I couldn't put the story down. I'm sure every one of your listeners has had an experience in life that was traumatic, and it's hard to write about it when you're so close to it. As the reader joins me in the story, where I'm a 23-year-old elected councilman, very young councilman, and then America's youngest mayor, they begin to understand not just the pressures, but the trauma of having all of the institutions of the city turn against me simply because I advocated keeping our city's municipal electric system under the ownership of the people of Cleveland. And there was a battle royal that was set off. And so as a result of my stand on Muni Light. And so, in looking back, I can fully understand why I was not able to write the book back then. But then, what you're seeing with the Division of Light and Power is actually the seventh draft that the last one I started in 2018 in the spring. I started writing and I wrote it straight through, didn't stop. And that's the version that you see right now. But anyone who's ever worked on a project and felt I just can't let this go. We'll know how I felt. And I was so excited 2 weeks ago when I finally had when I had the final copy in front of me, and I'm saying, "Oh, we're finally, after all these years, here's the story." And it's important now because look, with all of the things going on in local government, with the American Rescue Plan funds coming in, when those funds dry up, there'll be a mad rush on by big corporate interests to try to privatize municipal services. This book tells people how to fight back.
Wonderful. And I mean, I guess at the time, how did the media fail to examine, what had happened in the past in Cleveland government, and how did that, I guess, aid your your enemies, the banks and corporate people at CEI against you?
Well, the media was blinded by their advertising revenue, which was substantial from the Cleveland Electric Illuminating Company, the private utility monopoly that wanted to take over our municipal electric system. And as a result of their influence with their advertising dollars, CEI was able to write copy, which they took over to the media and had things broadcast and printed verbatim. They were writing editorials. They were helping to slant news stories. They were shaping the media environment in Cleveland, CEI was, as a result of the influence of their advertising dollars. And because I took a stand to defend Munilight, I was consequently being attacked for doing so by the same media, which had a slavish obeisance to their masters over at CEI. And I write throughout the book of incidents where reporters lost their job just raising questions about CEI's practices. And so this environment was a toxic environment where the media played a central role in trying to damage the public's interest.
Mm-hmm. Can you speak to, because obviously it's detailed in your book, but I guess one thing that really stands out in the book is your, talking about how the privatization of public utilities created frequent blackouts in the cities, especially on holidays and at moments where power and electricity would have been most important. People on holidays having refrigerators full of food go bad and things of that nature. And how did that make everyday life a living hell?
Well, let's back up a minute.
Yeah, sure.
The book opens up with me as a young councilman watching these utility lobbyists use their power to block legislation in city council that was aimed at repairing the city's generators so we could make our own power. And the city, when the generators failed, needed to get power from another source. CEI blocked us from buying power from outside the city. They made it so the only ones we could buy power from was CEI. And they charged the city 3 times what they were charging anyone else, which of course began to blow a hole in the municipal plant's budget. And so once they had that kind of control, when we were able to get a transfer of power from the private utility, it came at a premium price. But as the federal government recounted in investigations by the Atomic Safety and Licensing Commission of Nuclear Regulatory Commission, CEI transferred power in such a way so as to deliberately create blackouts on the Munilight system. And then they would send their employees, salesmen, into the Munilight neighborhoods, because they're about a third of the city where the CEI and Munilight competed side by side. They'd go into the Munilight neighborhoods with sales contracts saying, looks like your system isn't working too well. They were creating the blackouts. And so, the book opens with, I'm a newly elected councilman. All the lights are going off in Cleveland at Christmas time. I was downtown with my wife shopping. Christmas disappears. And throughout the book, there are blackouts that occur at key times: Christmas time, Memorial Day, other holidays. And this was all being engineered one way or another with the help or through the misdeeds of the Cleveland Electric Illuminating Company. And I want to point out that everything that I am saying is documented in the book. And that's what makes this book so unusual, in that it's not just a political thriller. It is documented about corporate espionage, corporate sabotage, mob-directed assassination plots, all connected with this Muni Light question and the fight to save it.
And I mean, I guess one of the sort of one of the standouts, or the standout moment of the book is when they finally were so blatant and literally offered you suitcases full of cash, and it was, I guess maybe at the time you didn't know it was a sort of take the money or else situation, or were they more clear than that? Did they actually?
Well, here's the way that
came
down.
Yeah.
On December 15th, 1978, I met with the head of the largest bank in Ohio. The bank was Cleveland Trust. The banker's name was Brock Ware. And during that meeting, Brock Ware told me, either you sell Muni Light to the private power company, in which it turns out the bank was a business partner, or we, the bank, will not renew the city's credit on loans that I hadn't taken out. They were taken out by the previous mayor. The banker also told me that if you agree to sell, here's the money, we will give you $50 million worth of new credit, and you can, spend any way you want. I mean, this was bribery. It was extortion. It was all out in the open. And the media did not defend the people. They defended the utility monopoly, and they defended the bank. That is, until one reporter finally stood up and began to tell the truth. He was fired by the plain dealer or had to leave because he couldn't report what he wanted. That then produced a near newspaper strike, which forced the plain dealer newspaper to finally begin to tell the truth. And so there has never been a story quite like this in American history with respect to municipal government. And the reason why it's important today is that people need to know who's really making decisions that affect City Hall. People need to know how to fight back when their government, the institutions of the community, not only fail the people, but actively go against their interests.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, because, obviously in the book you talked about your background and growing up in poverty in Cleveland. And I mean, where does one get the strength to turn down suitcases full of cash?
Look, I was born into a family that had trouble making ends meet because the family grew very fast. My mom had 7 children. I was the oldest. We never owned a home. We were renters. As the family grew, we had trouble finding rent. And even though my dad worked, like a lot of people in America today, there's a working poor that no matter how much you make, you can never make your ends meet. And so I developed from moving around, going from neighborhood to neighborhood, often inner city neighborhoods where the streets were a little bit tough. I developed a kind of steely resilience to outside events outside our home. And also, I did not come to rely on material things. So when anybody offered me some kind of materiality, if that collided with my own sense of ethics, with my spiritual training, it didn't matter. I mean, it didn't matter what they said they could do for me. It didn't matter what I was promised. I had my eye fixed on the polar star of the public interest and what was right for the people. And it matters what people pay for utility bills. It matters if they could get a 20% break on their utility bill, as they did when I began the fight to save Muni Light. It was about cheaper electricity. It was about lower taxes for the city of Cleveland, because if a private company owns the light system, you're paying more for street lights and lighting city facilities and operating water systems, sewer systems. There's a real economic impact and harm that is done to ordinary people when they cannot pay their utility bill. You probably read the passage in the book where, as a child, I'm in a 3-room apartment, which housed our family of 7 at that point, and I heard at nighttime I could hear my pennies. I could hear my parents counting pennies on an old white metal table. I could hear the pennies dropping, and I described that, and that memory had a real impact on me when I was sitting with that banker, and that banker was telling me, well, we'll give you $50 million and you have to sell this, or we're going to put the city into default. My thoughts were back to that 3-room apartment with parents and a large family, and having trouble making ends meet and trying to scrape up money to pay a utility bill. See, I remember where I came from. And that's one of the reasons why I was able to say no to the sale of Muni Light.
And I've always known you to be very humble, but I guess what does it feel like to be vindicated on something like this?
Look, when you're in the middle of it, you do the best you can. And you don't know if any day, you can't count on the record ever being cleared. All you can do is stand for what you believe in. So, I was privileged to take a stand for the people of Cleveland. And it's nice that events have borne out that I did the right thing. But while it was going on, I was widely condemned because the media was promoting the interests of the utility and the bank. And so to me, doing the right thing is its own reward. You can't look for rewards in this lifetime for doing the right thing. That's not going to happen.
Absolutely. And as Dennis has said, the Division of Light and Power is not just his own personal account. It is meticulously documented with a lot of sources and footnotes. And it is fascinating read. And it's honestly an empowering read about this epic political battle that he was engaged in as America's youngest mayor at the time. And I think it's a testament about doing the right thing. I wanted to see if we could actually ask you a few questions about, the Pioneer Podcast is the podcast of, we're an adventure travel company, and we do travel to, I guess our motto is places your mother wishes you'd stayed away from. And I'd actually like to turn the floor over to my co-host, Mr. Gareth Johnson, who I think has a few questions to you, because we actually travel to a few of the places that you have been to that very few Americans, I would say, have been to, especially right now.
Yeah. Hi, Dennis. Again, thank you for being on the show with us.
Thank you.
So again, from I understand that you've traveled to places like Syria. Us as a company, we travel to places like Syria, North Korea, and we get accusations of being, tools of the regime, and obviously worse things than that. Do you feel that there is positivity and engagement? How do you feel about, say, regimes like Syria and how we interact with them?
When you start getting into United States foreign policy, you get in. It's like wading into a swamp because you don't know what's beneath the surface. One of the things that being a councilman, a young councilman, and a young mayor taught me was that the entire community was being fed a very powerful a narrative that was false. Now, I took the lessons that I learned from Cleveland to Congress, and Cleveland's experience enabled me to lead the effort against the call to go to war against Iraq. I organized 125 Democrats and gave them a chapter and verse analysis of why it was wrong to go to war against Iraq. This was in October 2nd, 2002. Anybody can go to the web, type in Kucinich Iraq analysis, October 2nd, 2002. And what I said then, and here we are in 2021, I said Iraq had, there's no proof that Iraq had anything to do with 9/11 or Al-Qaeda's role in 9/11, that Iraq didn't have the intention or capability of attacking the United States, And the analysis went on, and everything I said back then, prior to the vote, turned out to be 100% true. Why? Because I was able to understand the underlying forces that were driving us in that direction. Now, that's also true of America's position with respect to the countries that you mentioned, because we're being fed a narrative that has a benefit for one group at the expense of others. We must keep in mind, that not only the Iraq War did the Iraq War cost Americans over $6 trillion, which added to the national debt, but it also, even more significantly, cost us the lives of so many of our young American men and women dedicated to the service of this country, and ruined others who, when those individuals were killed, and ruined others who were injured. And on top of all that, over 1 million innocent Iraqis were killed. Now, this all came about because of a big lie. And what I would say, by and large, is that what characterizes U.S. foreign policy is a bedrock of lies. And it would take more than this show, more than a year of shows, to be able to dissect the U.S. policy in many different countries around the world.
Yeah, I think you're right. So, would you say, essentially, what reasons do you think America went to war? Was it just about oil? Was there sort of similarities from when you were a mayor, in that it was essentially private interest and private business that led America down this road?
All of the above. It's if you're looking at politics and you you do an analysis using the logic of the game Clue, every weapon is being used to influence public opinion, and every weapon is being used to commit the crime, whether it's the private interests of war contractors, the political interest of other countries, the desire for revenge, for perceived or real slights. This just doesn't end. You're talking about an approach not only to governance, but an approach to life, where some people think that you can solve every problem that exists in the world at the barrel of a gun, and that doesn't happen.
So you also actually met Assad, am I right?
I interviewed him for Fox News, and that interview is still on the web, and it's worth looking at, because I asked him a lot of challenging questions. This was not some kind of a PR game. If it was a baseball game, I was throwing fastballs all the way. And he had to answer the questions. So, we get obsessed with the personalities of leaders, but sometimes we don't get into the deeper underlying story of what actually is going on. And in that interview, that's exactly what I did. I got into the underlying story, and that's what I would. And in the book, The Division of Light and Power, I take the reader on a journey where they see what's going on behind the scenes and start to ask questions. Is this what's going on behind the scenes in my city? Who's really making the decisions? When a decision is made that goes against the interests of the people, what can you do about it? This book is a handbook, pretty big one, on how to fight back, on how to stand up, on how to speak out, on how to develop the strategy. It's all there. And so, the book equips people to be more active citizens, to be more informed citizens. And that's what I advocate, not only on domestic policy, but of course I advocate the same thing with respect to international policy.
Okay, so another place that we people to, and is obviously quite controversial from an American point of view, is we take people to North Korea. So you stood for president. Obviously, we saw what Donald Trump tried to do with North Korea. But had you been American president, how would you have approached the North Korean issue, for example?
How do you change people's minds if you don't talk to them? How do you move and create a better world if you isolate the world's most powerful nation from the world's least powerful nation? I mean, we act like, instead of realizing the incredible influence that America has on a world stage, we act like we should be pussyfooting around in dealing with other countries. Look, we have to be in a position to always open up and discuss with other countries. It's like what John F. Kennedy said in his inauguration in January of 1961. He said, let us not negotiate out of fear, and let us not fear to negotiate. We always have to be in a position of talking to others. And the attempt to stop conversation is an attempt to control and an attempt to block any kind of human progress. I mean, you think about our own personal experience when you have difficulty with someone. You may choose not to talk to them. That's your privilege. But to say as a steadfast rule, you cannot talk to that person, no, that's not the way free-thinking people act.
It was rather remarkable to me to see the media and I guess the left wing parrot almost verbatim the talking points that were said when President Clinton engaged Kim Jong-il at the end of his presidency, thinking that Al Gore was about to win the next election. And then to see those same talking points said by the media again and the political, the sort of left-wing establishment when President Trump tried engagement as well. From where do you think they were getting those talking points? Is there, we're talking...
Look, the media represents diverse corporate interests. It's just that when you're talking about major media, there's fewer and fewer outlets today than there were years ago. That's counterbalanced by the proliferation of social media and podcasts like Pioneer. So, see, where America has been getting in trouble is we think, that you either have to be a Democrat or Republican, you have to be left, right. Look, Americans are not that ideological. Americans are practical, they're pragmatic. They want to see government work. And government does work. The question is, who is it working for? And often a barroom brawl type atmosphere is created so as to distract people from who's really walking off with the cash register. And so, we need to wake up about what's really going on here. And we have all these skirmishes between each other. Well, somebody's cashing in. So, I always felt as a member of Congress for 16 years, there was an advantage in walking across to the other side of the aisle and spending time getting to know individuals who happen to be a different party, who happen to be perhaps very conservative. And I learned from them. I learned not only how they look at the world, but I've learned where we could build bridges so we could communicate with each other, and that can lead to the important policy changes that the country needs. But when we isolate ourselves in hyper-partisan warring political camps, all that we can look forward to is a disgruntled constituency and a government which is paralyzed by hyper-partisanship.
Absolutely. And I have one last question because I know we're running out of time. And I wanted to ask, so we're talking about that. We're talking about engagement, going across the aisle, and especially with respect to U.S. foreign policy, countries like Syria, North Korea, and obviously high-level engagement from leader right at the top is important. But then, I wanted to get your thoughts on what are your thoughts, on lower level engagement from, Dennis Rodman going and doing basketball diplomacy in the same way that we had ping pong diplomacy in China, and even tourism to places like North Korea and Syria. Do you think that all of that helps as a larger in the larger front of engagement and breaking down barriers between societies that are essentially polar opposite?
Look, it always helps to meet people. I've had the blessing of being able to travel around the world and meeting people in many different countries, many different cultures. And when you do that, you find out that people are a lot alike. One of the things that Ted Koppel did with ABC's Nightline many years ago was to bring together through television people in Russia and the United States. And they found out that they had a lot in common. I mean, I remember the first time I went to Russia and flew as the plane broke through the clouds on the way to Sheremetyevo Airport, and flew over the Russian countryside, which looks surprisingly like Pennsylvania years and years ago. You came to an understanding of the simplicity and the humility of so many Russians. And I thought back to my own childhood and the escalation of the Cold War and the Cuban Missile Crisis and how we almost annihilated each other. I mean, that's the great human tragedy that comes from isolating ourselves and not reaching out and getting to know each other. So yes, we should have unrestricted ability to go in and meet people from other countries. We should be able to reach out and find out how people live, to find out how they think. Every individual in every different country is trying to figure out a way to survive within the system in which they were born. And if you check around, there's a lot of unhappy people in the world, but everybody's trying to make do with where they're born and what they're given. And it's not for us, by the way, as a country, to try to tell other people how to live. But it is important to find out how they live and to make sure that they live.
Well, I mean, would you say as well, I mean, is there a little bit of a hypocrisy as well, where we have strong opinions against countries like North Korea, Iran, and Syria, where other countries, your Saudi Arabias or whatever, get left alone? We sort of let them,
Well,
you can do how you want.
when you use the word hypocrisy in the same and talk about politics, it's redundant.
Yeah.
And bringing everything back around to your new book, The Division of Light and Power, about your battle against corporate interests and big banks as the city of Cleveland's youngest mayor. I'm reading some conflicting reports, but it seems as though you're pretty serious about running for re-election of mayor of Cleveland.
That's right.
Yep.
I announced for mayor a few days ago. People want information on the campaign. They could go to Kucinich.com, Kucinich.com, and find out about the campaign. I'm running for mayor again.
Okay.
Our city is half the size of what it was when I was mayor the first time. But it's not only lost population, it's lost the concept of public safety. We have a high crime and a lot of poverty. And I still have a great energy, and I want to use it to be of service to my community. I could say that to say I'm wiser than I was when I started, read the book.
And how would you fix things?
Oh my, let's have another chat.
Yes, sorry, that's a bit of a broad question there, I guess.
So I guess that answers, because my last question was going to be, what is next for Dennis Kucinich? But I think that answers that question.
Yeah. Also, though, I mean, I really appreciate being on Pioneer Podcast to be able to talk about the book. You have, the people who listen to you are involved in traveling. This book is a great book to travel with. It'll help pass the time very quickly from point A to point B. and it's an easy read, but at the same time, it brings people along with me through this experience of learning what happens when government doesn't work and who it's really working for and what the centers of power are in a community and what the risks are when a public official fights City Hall from the inside.
Absolutely. And I can't recommend this book more. It's absolutely a fascinating read and totally engrossing. And I wish you the best of success with your future endeavors and your current campaign to return as mayor of Cleveland.
Thank you so much for this chance to be on the Pioneer podcast, and hopefully we'll have a chance to speak again. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you,
Wonderful.
Dennis.
Thank you very much. Cheers. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
And this has been a free premium episode of the Pioneer Podcast. If you liked what you heard, please visit ypt.life, sign up and subscribe, and you can have exclusive access to content all about and pertaining to places your mother wishes you'd stayed away from. Until next time, this is your co-host, Justin Martell, signing off for both me and Gareth Johnson. Talk soon.